Hi, I'm Carter Wilson, best-selling author and writing coach, and welcome back to Motivations for Writers. So today I want to talk about something that most writers, I think they pretend they understand, but very few are willing to face head on. And it's not just about facing the blank page. It's not about rejection. It's not even about failure. I think the real fear in writing sometimes is honestly getting better. And maybe that sounds inspiring. Maybe it sounds like something you would see on a coffee mug or post online with a self-focused photo of a journal on a windowsill. But the truth is, if you're serious about your craft, if you really want a writing career and not just a hobby you tinker with when you have free time, then you know the truth. Getting better is brutal. It's really, really difficult. It forces you to confront everything your ego wants to protect. It demands humility and vulnerability. It requires you to be wrong more often than you're right. And at some point, it's going to make you question your instincts and your identity in ways that feel genuinely uncomfortable. Today, I want to take you inside that discomfort, and that's not to scare you, but to tell the truth about what it takes to grow as a writer in a real, sustainable way. There's a balance you have to strike. Your instinct, of course, is vital, but it's also flawed. Your ego gives you confidence, but it also blinds you. The only way to navigate the gap between these forces is to practice listening. Listening to yourself, mostly, but listening to feedback. Listening to the books that you read, listening to the shows you watch, listening to what resonates and what rings false. Improvement is not a clean path. It's a messy process. I can tell you in my own 20 plus year journey, every book is a learning process. You constantly have to accept that your old habits might be holding you back, and you have to accept that the pages you wrote last year are not as good as the ones you can write today. You continuously build the muscle. Growth requires loss. You lose ignorance. You lose false confidence. You lose those comfortable shortcuts. But if you stay with it, if you let the discomfort happen without running from it, I think you gain something way more powerful. You start to trust the right parts of yourself. You start to hear what matters. You start to recognize the difference between feedback that helps you and feedback that dilutes your story. So we're talking about teaching you how to navigate all of that. How to know when to cling to your instincts and when to step aside. How to build the emotional endurance to accept criticism. How to expose yourself to mountains of feedback without losing your voice. And how to study the world of story in a way that strengthens the foundation you lean on every time you sit down to write. So let's get into it, because this is the part of the creative process that separates the people who want to write from the people who actually do. Instinct is gold, but it's not gospel. Let's start here. Every writer, of course, has instinct. That instinct shows up the first time you feel compelled to write anything. It's the spark that tells you something in your imagination is worth following. It's the tug that pulls you toward a premise or a character. I've had characters that have just shown up in my head and stayed there for a year until I started writing about them. Instinct shows up in a way you react to stories you love. You know when a line of dialogue just hits you. You know when a scene gives you that little electric jolt. You know when something on the page just feels alive. So that part of you is essential, and you can't write without it. But instinct can get writers into trouble because they confuse it with absolute truth. They think instinct means they always know what's best for the story. They think instinct means they never need to rethink a decision or revise a scene. They think instinct is enough. It's not. Instinct is the beginning of craft, not the end of it. It guides you, but it also misleads you. Instinct can tell you when a moment is emotionally charged, but it can't always tell you if the execution of that moment is sloppy. Instinct can tell you a character feels real in your head, but it can't tell you if a reader will see the same depth on the page. Instinct can give you confidence, but it's not going to protect you from blind spots. So you have to hold instinct lightly. Trust it enough to move forward, but not enough to stop questioning. I think the writers who fail are the ones who think instinct is a shield. They protect their stories from scrutiny because they believe their gut is always right. The writers who succeed are the ones who let instinct start the fire, but then let refinement shape the rest. And instinct gets stronger when you expose it to good storytelling, when you read books that challenge you, when you watch shows that inspire you, when you pay attention to the rhythms of dialogue, the structure of tension, the emotional shifts that make characters compelling. Every time you absorb something powerful, it's your instinct that becomes sharper. It starts to recognize patterns. It starts to understand nuance. It learns what feels authentic and what feels forced. So you can't rely on instinct unless you take responsibility for shaping it, for being curious about it. And let's talk about ego. Writers love to pretend they have no ego. Many writers talk about just being open to critique. They say they value feedback. They say they want to improve. But the moment someone points out a flaw in their work, the moment someone challenges a scene they love, the moment someone questions a character they're attached to, what happens? The ego steps in and panics. That's not to say all criticism is right. There's a lot of criticism that isn't right for you, isn't right for your story. But your ego doesn't hate criticism because criticism is wrong. Your ego hates criticism because it threatens your sense of control. Your ego wants to believe you're a good writer. It wants to believe you have talent. It wants to believe you can trust yourself. And all of that is true, but it doesn't mean your work is perfect. It doesn't mean you could skip revision. It doesn't mean you can just dismiss critiques that make you feel uncomfortable. The ego's job is to protect you. The problem is that it protects the wrong things sometimes. It defends your pride, not your craft. It defends your comfort and not your growth, your illusions, not your truth. You need your ego. You need confidence. You need the belief that you can create something worth reading. I mean, without that, you'd never sit down at the keyboard. But you can't let your ego drive. You have to put it in the back seat. You have to acknowledge that it will complain, but you can't let it dictate your decisions. Your ego will tell you that criticism is a threat. And your craft knows criticism is information. Your ego will tell you to shut out anything that feels painful. Your craft knows that pain is sometimes the first sign of an opening. Your ego will tell you to trust only yourself. And your craft knows you can't grow inside an echo chamber. So you need to build a relationship with your ego that's based on awareness. Recognize the voice of defensiveness when it shows up. Notice when you shut down. Notice when a critique makes you want to cling tighter to the original version of a scene. Again, that doesn't mean the critic is right. It just means you need to slow down and listen to what your reaction is trying to tell you. Be curious about your feelings. Sometimes your ego is reacting because the critique threatens something true and important in your story. Sometimes your ego is reacting because that critique hit a nerve and exposed a weakness you did not want to acknowledge. It's your job to learn the difference. And I can tell you from experience that it takes time, patience, and a willingness to be uncomfortable. Let's talk about feedback. Most writers treat feedback like a very fragile object. They only want it from certain people. They only want it when they're ready. They only want it in small, manageable amounts. They're afraid that too much feedback will break them or confuse them or make them lose their voice. But you need mountains of feedback. That is the bare truth as a writer. You need critiques from critique groups. You need notes from agents. You need comments from online communities. You need suggestions from trusted readers, preferably those who are not your immediate family. You need to see the wide range of opinions that can exist about your work. Because patterns only emerge in volume. A single critique is a really poor sample size. 10 critiques are directional. When you expose yourself to a large enough sample of responses, that's when you start to see the difference between personal taste and structural weakness. One reader might hate your protagonist, another might love them. That's fine. That's noise. But if 5 readers tell you the pacing collapses in the second act, that's not noise. That's truth. Writers who isolate themselves from feedback never grow. They cling to the belief that their instincts are enough. They cling to the belief that revision is optional, or that they can improve without exposing themselves to criticism. But I'm telling you, you can't develop taste in a vacuum. You can't refine your voice in a vacuum. You're never going to become a stronger storyteller if the only person you listen to is yourself. And don't get me wrong, feedback isn't about pleasing everyone. You can't please everyone. You look at a book of mine on Goodreads with maybe 50,000 ratings, and it's going to be about a 3.7 average. That's about right. You can't please everybody. But it's about learning to identify patterns. It's about learning to hear what resonates. It's about developing internal resilience. I can tell you, if you're in a critique group with 6 people, you might get 6 different opinions on a chapter that you submitted to them. Clearly, you can't change that chapter to accommodate all 6 of those opinions. But there might be an opinion in there that it just resonates with you. The feedback, you can feel it on your skin. That means you started developing the instinct to know what you didn't see before, but you know to be true. That's how you build instinct. That's how you build craft. And it's how you build emotional endurance. The more you expose yourself to feedback, the more you begin to feel the difference between critiques that click and critiques that clang. Good feedback resonates in your chest. It hits you with a kind of recognition. You might not want to hear it, but you know it's right. Because it has weight. It has clarity. It has the quality of something you secretly knew already, but you were avoiding. Every time I submit a book to my editor at my publisher, I get an editorial letter. And there are some hard truths in every one of those letters. But you do it enough and you get excited because you know this trusted person is going to give you advice that's going to make your book better. And a lot of times I'll read this letter and I'll just see all these things that I couldn't see for myself, but I know they're right. And sometimes I won't even know what the answer is, how to do what they're suggesting needs to be done. But you write long enough, you get a confidence where you know you can solve the problem. You just don't know it in the moment. So a good exercise, I think, is to read feedback out loud to yourself and pay attention to your body. Not your ego, your body. Do you feel resistance or relief? Do you feel a pull or a push? Does something inside you soften or tighten? The wisdom is usually there. Your job is to simply slow down enough to hear it. And when feedback dissonance shows up, you're going to feel that too. It has kind of a hollow quality to it. It doesn't settle in. You can turn it over in your mind 100 times and it still feels vague or disconnected from your vision, from your voice. And you should trust that. Not defensively, but with awareness. Dissonance is not a rejection of critique. It's clarity. I had someone in my critique group who hated when I wrote fragmented sentences. But if I'm writing from first person present tense, I'm inside that character's brain. That's how they think. And I knew that it bothered them, but I also knew that I was right. So I would thank them for their critique, and I wouldn't change a single thing. So let's talk a little bit about what you can do to hone those instincts, because you can't improve your writing if you're only studying your own sentences. You need a constant influx of new material. You need to read widely. You need to watch great television and film, especially in the genres you write. Not because you're looking for ideas to copy. Of course, that's not the point. The point is to expose your creative instinct to a variety of structures, rhythms, tones, and styles. When you read regularly, your sense of structure sharpens. You start to notice patterns and pacing. You start to understand how different authors build tension. You start to see how dialogue carries energy, or feel when a scene drags or when a scene crackles. On some level, you internalize every story you read. It becomes part of your creative vocabulary. I think reading teaches you what feels real, and watching teaches you what feels alive. Listening teaches you what sounds natural. Every story you consume becomes a reference point. You start to notice what you love in other writers. You notice what you don't love. You pick up on what feels too slow or too fast. You notice what makes you laugh or cringe or maybe lean in closer. All those reactions matter. All those reactions shape your instinct. They sharpen your sense of taste. If you don't read enough, I can tell you your writing is going to plateau. If you don't watch enough, your sense of pacing will flatten. You need variety, you need challenge, you need inspiration. You can't trust your instincts if you never give them anything to learn from. So let's make this all practical. You need a process. You need a way to approach feedback without getting lost or defensive. You need a method for weighing instinct against criticism. So I'm going to give you what I think is a simple framework that works. Step 1. Finish the draft before you ask for feedback. That's a tough one because sometimes your fragile ego worries, what if I screwed up starting in chapter 3? Wouldn't it be better to get advice before I finish the draft? The problem is, some people get stuck workshopping those first 3 chapters forever. They never get anywhere. If that's you, complete the story. It's going to be messy. There's a reason they call it the shitty first draft. Step 2, let the draft sit. Give it distance, maybe a week, a couple weeks, a month. Long enough to detach your ego from the sentences. I can tell you this is one that I really struggle with. I finish my draft and the next day I want to start revising. But I've realized over time when I give it a little space to breathe, my perspective aligns a little bit more properly. Step 3, give it to a variety of readers, not just the friend or family member who loves everything you write. Mix your sources, a critique group, a mentor, a writing partner, a writing coach, a beta reader, an agent if you have one. Step 4, read all the feedback without reacting. Don't argue, don't explain, don't panic, just absorb. Step 5, look for patterns. 3 people saying the same thing is not a coincidence. Pay attention. Step 6, reread your draft with those critiques in mind. See if the problems others noticed are problems you can now see for yourself. Step 7, try the revisions that resonate the most. Even if you're not sure, just try them, experiment. You only learn by doing. Step 8, maybe read the revised version out loud. Hear the rhythm, hear the flow, feel the impact of those changes. Step 9, trust what feels true. If your inner sense says that the change makes your story stronger, keep it. If you think it's diluting your voice, adjust it. If it introduces a new idea you love, maybe explore it. Step 10, repeat this process. Every book, every draft, every stage of your career. This is how you balance instinct with feedback without losing your mind. Once you learn to navigate this process, you'll feel something shift. You'll see your writing improving. Your fear will decline. Your trust in yourself becomes more grounded and less fragile. You stop fearing criticism. In fact, you start seeking it because you know it's going to help you. You stop seeing revisions as punishment. You start seeing them as the place where your book truly forms. And the reward isn't just better pages, it's the version of yourself that emerges from this work. A writer who's honest, a writer who's brave, a writer who can take a hit and keep moving, a writer who can change without losing their voice, one who's committed to getting better, even when that means being uncomfortable. That's the kind of writer who builds a real career. Not a lucky break, not a one-book moment, a career. It takes long, but it'll happen. Improvement is terrifying, but it's worth every uncomfortable step. So if you take nothing else from this motivation, take this. Getting better is always going to feel risky. It's always going to feel like stepping into the unknown. But the unknown is where every breakthrough lives. You don't grow by protecting yourself. You grow by walking into the fire with enough courage to stay there until the heat shapes you into something stronger. So keep going. Keep improving. Keep letting that discomfort guide you toward the work that matters. You're not alone in this. Every serious writer is facing the same quiet terror. The ones who make it are the ones who stop running from it. You can do this. Now get back to the page.